I think my ability to focus is definitely a key characteristic and has really helped me. I think without that, I would have a difficult life. I grew up in an academic family. My dad is an academic. He's a professor of game theory. So I had some academics in my house, an academic atmosphere, but my surrounding outside my house was extremely not academic. The school system was mediocre at best. In general, academics or school was really not a part of my life. It was the most negligible part of kind of what I cared for, what I focused on. I think really any form of academic came into my life after the age of 20. I remember actually when I was probably 9th grade or 9th grade, I remember I got a report card, which was horrible. But one of the things that I remember, there were how many days you were missing. And I had to remember something like 158 days. And I remember my dad looking at the report card, and he's like, how can that be? There's not that many days of school. How can you be missing 158 days? So that's kind of to show you, nobody called my parents, here, I now live in the US. I have 3 children who are raised in the US. And there, my poor kid tries to ditch one class, and immediately I get a phone call that the kid was not in class. In Israel, kids can enjoy the entire year. Nobody would know what they're doing. And so that was kind of the environment I grew up with. My parents were not happy with how my performance at school, to say the least. My mom was less, she cared less. She was all about health and us eating well and being happy. And I know academics were not for her the most important thing. But my dad, being an academic himself, he was quite upset. He gave me a hard time. Especially my older sister was a pretty good student, and she was a very serious kind of girl. So that was their expectation. And then came me, who I was a bit of a troublemaker. So I remember I was telling him, I want to go out with my friends. And first he was like, no, you didn't study, you don't go out. And then, of course, he was also really unhappy with the hours, that we went out very late until 4 a.m. But I remember I had a secret way of convincing him. So I told him, okay, give me a riddle. And if I solve the riddle, I can go out. As soon as I start talking with him about math, he gets, a little more soft. So that was my way of, exiting the house at night. I used to solve a math riddle, and, if I was successful, I got my way out. So yeah, that was my secret weapon to a happy childhood. Actually, I really loved math as a kid. The discovery did not come later. It came very early on, but there was no way to explore it. And I remember we learned this, how to do long division. And it's like an algorithm. And I remember thinking, why does it work? So you copy the number here, you subtract, you add, put digit here, put digit there, but why does it work? And I remember I convinced myself, I kind of what I would call now a proof, why this algorithm works. And I remember feeling like so happy, like I got it. And I knew it at that point that, that's rare. Like none of the kids tried to figure out, as soon as they could do the algorithm, they were happy. So I knew I had a love that other kids didn't. But there was nothing to do with it. I even remember when I was in 4th grade, they chose some kids, but a lot of them, so almost I think half the class, I don't know, a big chunk of kids, to do some advanced math. I don't remember what it was, but they were chosen to kind of move on to some program or whatever, and I wasn't chosen. So it just shows you, in a random, mediocre place, they chose almost half the class. So I was like, I didn't shine in any way to other people in other people's minds. But for me, I actually did know I love math, but I didn't know what really to do with it. So I was a terrible student. I never studied. All I did in high school, all I did was sports. I was a competitive water skier, and I was in the water skiing park all day, before school, during school, after school. But in college, when I started college, I remember after my first class, right away, as soon as I entered the first class, it was like, I was so happy. I was so happy because they taught me such interesting things and abstract thinking. And it was, I remember that from day number one in college, essentially until now. I feel like I devote 100% of my free time, of the time I can, to study math and do research, study, teach. I got hooked really after first day. Studying math for me really changed the way I think about life, and a little bit, I can't say in core my personality, but it did leave a very significant imprint in the way I think. And one of the things, indeed, it made me a much more humble person, because when you study math, there's some things that you are sure they're right. You have very strong confidence. And then you learn, actually, you were wrong. And, when enough times you have a very, very strong belief that something is true, and then you get a proof that what you thought of is false, you start to be a little more humble person and questions your opinion more and are open to other ideas more. And that's a theme that happens a lot in mathematics, where our very, very basic intuitions are actually incorrect. I find doing research and even studying math a very meditative experience. It has some very beautiful and clean and abstract way of thinking that for me is like deep meditation. My kids sometimes laugh at me that when I think or when I work, they're like, Mom, 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 Mom. They get upset because I'm so deep in thought, I kind of can't hear anything. I like working in cafes a lot. I go outside to sit in a cafe and work. And people tell me, aren't you distracted by conversations? I can't even hear what people are talking about. I'm so kind of deep in thoughts. And I remember once after I was sitting in a cafe and I was thinking, and I was like thinking. And then a person just was looking at me. He's like, what are you staring at? Like all upset. And he kind of, as if I woke up from a dream. I'm so sorry. I didn't even notice that I was just thinking, and I guess my eyes got stuck at the poor guy who felt like, I don't know, I'm stalking him or something. But I do feel I get into very focused modes when I think. It's a very calming experience. I like it a lot. I studied math in the Hebrew University. At that time, by the way, it was when computer science, it existed, but it wasn't a thing. It wasn't so popular like it is today. And I remember I got a lot of, from my dad and other people, what are you going to do with mathematics? What do you want to be a math teacher? And I remember thinking, no, I don't know what I want to do with it. I was thinking that's a basic, I'll do that and then I'll think what I want to do. So I didn't come with a clear intention of what I want to do. I think mainly I really wanted to study it. It was something I really had passion towards and I wanted to study. I remember my dad told me, it's not good to only study math. You won't have a job. You should study economics too. And I remember telling him, I'm really not interested in economics. Like, well, you should at least do a partial degree, like a half or something in economics. After a while, I was like, fine, I'll add economics. So I added economics to my undergrad kind of main study. I went to my first course, the first class. After one class, I was like, I can't take this. This is not for me. And immediately I kind of canceled this idea. So I really, my path was more from passion than from it came from my heart and not from my head. Maybe, I don't know, it may be the fact that I'm a woman that allowed me to not be so stressed about, what is going to be I wasn't sure. My mom she worked, but she never had a career, really. And she stopped working as soon as my dad made enough money to support the family. So I grew up thinking, oh, her life is great. Like my mom seemed so happy, so free. She did whatever she wants. And I was thinking maybe my life is going to be similar. So I wasn't really thinking of me having a career. I started actually doing a graduate, like master's in Hebrew University in math. So I continued math because I really love math. I still do. But I felt at that point you start doing research. And I looked at what kind of research people are doing, and it seemed very incremental to me. It seemed like a very old subject that has been studied for so many years. And it really felt like what's left are crumbs. I'm not saying that's true, but that's what it felt like for me. That either the questions out there are either too hard or not interesting. So I wanted something a little more new. I was looking for, I wanted to do research in a place that I can contribute and solve interesting problems, really interesting problems. And at that point, I remember a friend of mine told me, you should go to theoretical computer science. First I said, you should go to computer science. I was like, oh, no, I'm so not a technical person. Like, I don't like to program. Anything that has to do with any kind of electric device is not for me. So I was like, there's no way I'm going to do it. And I remember he told me, well, you should at least take a class by Avi Vigderzon. He's teaching a great class in, I remember the name of the class was Pseudo-Random Generators. And I remember telling him, I'm not taking any class about generators. To me, I thought it's like some electricity device. Today, I know that it's just about randomness. But I remember he actually needed to convince me. It took a lot of convincing. And then I went to his class finally, and I loved it. So that was kind of my, the first kind of my pathway to theoretical computer science. And then I was thinking, it was kind of clear to me that that's just math in disguise, and it just has more kind of interesting new problems. And that's when I went to Weizmann Institute. I showed them my transcript, I told them I'm interested, and I was told that they do an exam, an entrance exam. I just wanted to say I want the exam. I was very late in the application, so I was way too late. But I was hoping, I had very good grades from undergrad, so I was hoping they'll see my grades and let me do the exam, or maybe, waive some deadlines for me. So I came to the head of the department, I showed him my transcript. I remember he was like, oh, that looks great. Yeah, welcome. And I was like, what do you mean welcome? I got in? He's like, yeah. I'm like, I don't need an exam? He said, no, your grades are really good, so it's okay. I'm like, really? And then I started questioning that entire place. I'm like, that easily you let people in? And I remember telling him, but wait, I don't even know how to program. And he was like, oh, me neither. I'm like, is this place a joke? But it's a great place, a terrific place. And so that's where I did my master's degree. And with Adi Shamir, I had an amazing experience. I think somehow Adi's personality, the way he gave it, he taught in a way that really got me captivated. Also the subject, even though the way he taught him very applied, kind of, or much more applied than my interest. But so I'm not sure it's the actual content, because actually the content itself is not, as I said, it's more applied. I like more theory, more kind of math oriented. But something about the way he taught it really captured me. And then I remember I felt like I want to work with him. I don't care on what. Yeah, one thing that's really nice about cryptography that I really like is it's both mathematically very, very interesting. So when you sit and solve the problem, it's really, really interesting riddle. I don't know, it's beautiful questions, but also it's very relevant. It has real life relevance. And that's something that, like, why I chose not to do math, is that it seemed, who cares? So people, came up, okay, they worked so hard and this is the result. And you're like, who cares? I mean, of course, to them, they care. I'm not saying, I don't, but like, I wanted to work on something that I can explain to people why it's interesting. So yeah, my research, it's theoretical in nature. I do a lot of other things too, but one of the focus areas that I've been working on for many years is on securing computation, which means if you ask someone to do a computation for you, let's say it's expensive computation, you can't afford to do it on your little device that you have at home, and you outsource that computation to some cloud computer or some other entity that you may not trust. So you outsource this computation, and then you want somehow a certificate from them that the outcome is correct. So, maybe it's an expensive computation, so they have the incentive to not do it and just tell you the outcome and that's it. So you want some certificate that certifies that this outcome is indeed correct. So that's kind of one example of a problem that I've been studying for a while. How do you get these very succinct certificates for very complicated computations with kind of a soundness condition that ensures that you can verify it, and if you verify it, then you know that it's correct. Typically, I feel like research questions come to me. I don't search that much because the world is changing so fast that it just raises questions. So, for example, the questions about succinct proofs, when it started when cloud computing came about, there was all of a sudden, it was many years ago, but all of a sudden people talk about cloud computing and that computation is not done on your own device anymore. Computation will be done in the cloud. And immediately you're like, wait, so what about privacy? What about integrity? It immediately kind of these questions come to you. More recently, I've been involved in kind of quantum. So now, quantum computers are starting to seem like they may be a reality. This raises also a lot of questions, a lot of concerns in terms of cryptography, because now we need all our crypto systems to be secure against quantum adversaries, possibly. And then another question is also not just as an adversary, but actually, okay, if quantum computers will be available, how can we use them securely? So I guess my answer is the world throws problems at you. The world is moving fast enough that kind of you get a stream of problems thrown at you kind of daily. In cryptography, it's enough that there's one strong quantum computer and that can break our schemes. So it's enough, you don't need, the concern is you don't need to wait until we'll all have quantum, abilities on our own devices. It's enough that a few of them exist and we're in danger. So, and moreover, in cryptography, you need to be ahead of the game. So if now, you can't wait until it will be a reality. By then, it's too late. So I think now there's a huge amount of a push in the cryptographic community to make everything post-quantum secure. We need all the brain power we can get. It's a great field to be in. So for PhD, I went to MIT. So I moved there because I met my boyfriend, who's now my husband. He was a postdoc at MIT, and I wanted to be with him. So I kind of, at the spur of the moment, I just thought I'll go visit and I'll see how things go. And I remember after I came to the U.S. I left my apartment. I had an apartment. I left it. I didn't pack. I just went to be with him for a bit. I didn't know how long. I thought probably 2 weeks. I think my plane ticket was for 2.5 weeks. And we went on a road trip together. And then by the end, I remember he was telling me, so what's the plan? Are you how's this going to work? Are you planning to go back home? And I was like, no, I want to stay with you. And I remember as soon as I told him that, we were on a road trip somewhere in the south. We drove 14 hours straight almost. And he was like, okay, the semester at MIT is starting tomorrow. I'm like, what do you mean? I'm a student at Weizmann Institute. He's like, okay, I remember we came back to Cambridge, and I remember kind of the next day, I remember sitting in a class taught by Madhusudan. And I remember thinking to myself, what the hell am I doing here? How did this happen to me? Why am I sitting here? And then I asked Madhusudan, who was the first person that I interacted with, if actually he even offered, he knew Adam, because Adam was a postdoc there. And he was telling me, if you want to stay, you can be a visiting student. And I'm like, really? How do you apply for that? He's like, oh, I can support you. I'll fund you for a visiting student. I was so surprised. I was like, why would you do that? Nothing. And it's very hard to get into MIT. It's very, very selective. I was like, so at that point I was thinking, wow, people probably really love Adam, my husband, my boyfriend at the time, because why would you want to take me? But he did. And then Shafi Goldwasser, who turned out to be my advisor, she was actually on my committee for my master's degree in Weizmann. She's both in Weizmann and at MIT, at least at the time she was. And then I remember I contacted her. I told her that I'm coming to MIT. I want to stay at MIT for a while, and if she's interested in working with me. And I remember she was telling me, I want you as my student, so don't worry, you just need to go through the application. Don't spend too much time on it, just kind of, and so moving kind to MIT was a very smooth transition. I was very lucky, especially now that I'm sitting in the admission to take, to accept PhD students. I feel like so hard to get in. I would never have gotten in. But, luckily I I already had some papers and people knew my work. So that part was easy. And in terms of leaving my family and my country, it's interesting. I didn't think about that. I always felt like it's for now. Everything is for now. So I wasn't actually aware of how significant this decision was. Only when my kids reached a certain age that it hit me that this is actually a permanent, nothing is permanent, but like that I'm raising American kids and my kids are American. And even though my family, my kids they all speak Hebrew fluently and we go to Israel a lot. And so they do have an Israeli aspect to their personality and the way they grew up. But the fact that it was a major decision hit me only much, much later. Yeah, so Shafi Goldwasser was my PhD advisor. When I went to my PhD, I didn't even think about the fact that until then, until the end of my PhD, I didn't really think about the fact that I'm a woman in computer science. It didn't seem that the gender is the issue here. It's about science, not about gender. I didn't think about it. Indeed, it was very rare to have women. It's most students around me were male. So I was in clear, I was in a minority. That was not a question. But I didn't focus on it. I didn't care. And Shafi is a very strong woman. And now she's very good. She's brilliant. And she's very, very highly regarded. My field has great women. And I never felt that women are less regarded than men. It never kind of hit me until I left MIT. That all of a sudden I noticed that actually in other places, women are, I see great women that I feel like are amazing, and other people may not view it that way. And that really hit me at that point. Yeah, so I think for women in computer science, it's often challenging. It's challenging for many reasons. A, they don't have role models. B, so I'm hoping that I'm helping a little bit in that front. B, they were raised often to think they're not as good. I mean, that's not the objective function for them often. I can say for myself, I remember actually when I went to PhD, I remember my grandmother telling my mom, how can you let her go into a PhD program? This way she will never find a husband. First, she'll find a husband, and then, from my perspective, she can do 10 PhDs. She can do as much as she wants, but first she needs a husband. And, I don't think my family is that extreme in that regard. I think a lot of women come from backgrounds where they're not, the expectations or what they weren't raised to think of themselves as strong academics. So, and together with being a minority in a field, it's challenging. My advice is don't just focus on what you believe you can accomplish. Go with your heart. Don't spend too much time. Don't spend energy on how other people view you, or it's hard. It's difficult. And it's easy to get very offended when a comment is thrown at you related to, you feel related to you being a woman that's not called for, but my advice is, as best you can, don't think about it. And, sometimes it bothers me that who cares of gender? This is not about gender. This is about science. Why do we even think about that? Do I tell, you have brown eyes, you have blue eyes, so who cares? This is, the gender is irrelevant here. It should be about science. So, that should be the goal. I think what's actually much harder is once you have children. And then juggling the two is very difficult. And here my huge advice is think about what you care, what's for you the most important things, and try to kind of reduce all the noise. So don't, you know what's important to you, what's important to you about raising your children, what's important for you in your career, and just focus on the most important things, because even that you don't have time for. But this advice is true for men and women. It's not only for women, but I think there's much more expectations outside of work from women than there are for men. Maybe it's getting better these days, but when we raised our kids, it was very clear. My husband and I were joking that, we were both academics. We had the same job. We split our demands from home, kids, house, everything, pretty much equally. I mean, there's things I focused on, there's things he focused on, and every time we left our little nest and talked to other people, it was clear that anything that had to do with the house or the children, it was on me. They have a father, so it's like whatever I did is not enough, and whatever Adam did is oh, what a great father, and so it's difficult to manage that. So my advice is just focus on what you believe and don't listen to others. And what's harder than for me actually not listening to others is easy, because I have a lot of confidence. So when I think I have a confidence in my way, and it's easy for me to shut off the world, but I know for many people it's hard. But what was harder for me is to actually understand what's really important for me and what things I can let go of. And that's, I think, harder. So, for example, I remember my son, when he was a newborn, I took all the clothes, everything for my sister. I never went shopping for him. And I remember walking with him in the store. He's all pink because my sister had a girl. So he's wearing all these pink things, whatever. And people, oh, she's so cute. And I'm like, thank you. Because, of course, I'm embarrassed to say it's a boy, actually. But I didn't have time to, our house was always super basic. And there's some things I was like, I don't care what my house looks like. I don't have time for that right now. So understanding, because of course I care what my house looks like, but not as much as the well-being and of my kids and what they eat and how their activities are much more important to me. So I just let go. You need to let go of things that are important to you, but not as important to you. So, you need to know what's worth your time right now and what is not worth. Some things are just toxic and you let them eat at you. So it's hard sometimes not to be affected by negative things that come your way, but that's very important, because it's a waste of energy and a waste of time, and you don't even get anything out of it. When I arrived to Georgia Tech, I had a child who was 2 years old, and right when I started in September 1st. In August 29th, the day before I'm supposed to start, I gave birth to my second child. So yeah, when I was in Georgia Tech, I already had 2 babies. We were planning on staying there for a long time, but after less than a year, we got a call from Jennifer Chase. She's from Microsoft, and I did my postdoc with her, half my postdoc with her at Microsoft Research. And she told us that she's opening a lab right next to MIT. And when I heard that, I remember Adam and I were both on the phone, on different phones, because she said she wanted to talk to us both. We both held our phone, and she told us she's founding a new research lab, and she wants us to join. And I was like, yes. I told her, we're going. Kind of whispering to him. And he, I remember he was like, wait, we were kind of, so for me, it was clear that I wanted to go back to Boston. I actually really liked Atlanta, but it was clear to me that going to a research lab at that point and leaving Georgia Tech was the right decision for me. When I talked to Jennifer first, when she told me she's opening a lab, I remember the first thing I told her was, well, I'm doing basic research. I'm not into, I can't really help Microsoft in any way. I like to work on just basic research. And she's like, of course, that's why we're hiring you. And I said, so, but I will be of no use. And she's like, I think differently. I'm like, no, but what's the expectation? I was worried because I'm like, you're going to hire me and then there's going to be expectations which I won't fulfill. So like, I want to understand, what is your expectation? Like, for you to do basic research. I was like, wait, I don't buy it. Why is that good for Microsoft? Like, that's what Microsoft wants. They want a few people to just do basic research. I was worried because I felt like at heart I'm an academic. And I was worried that I'm not a corporate person. So I felt like that's not a good home for me. On the other hand, I thought extremely highly of Jennifer Chase. Her group at Redmond was amazing, mathematicians and physicists and computer scientists. So I believed in her ability to hire great people. But I was worried because I felt like also I really enjoy working with students, and that bothered me a little bit. But with that, I also felt like I have 2 young children and I'm very, very busy, and I really just want to focus on doing research and raising the kids. And I felt like I can't handle a lot of overhead right now. And I remember I told her, I don't think I'm going to come for long. So I was very honest. I told her, look, this sounds great, but my heart is in academia. I'm happy to join for, 4 or 5 years, but eventually I'm going to go back to academia. I said, yeah, that's great. And actually it's funny because I stayed there for 15 years because it was impossible to leave. The place is heaven. I had such a great time at Microsoft. We had a great group, extremely academic. We had tons of visitors from academia, a lot of students, interns, and just students from the area, MIT, Harvard, BU, Northeastern. It felt like a very, very academic kind of oasis. And I couldn't do better work anywhere else. I'm very, very lucky to have had that opportunity. So each person is productive in different circumstances. And having the freedom to work in whatever way is good for you is very important. Another thing that is very important is to have people around you to talk to and to bounce ideas. For me, there are a few people who work well in vacuum, actually, but most of us, we need other people to kind of bounce idea off, have kind of late night parties with, next to the board and, celebrate together, cry together when things don't work, like do this roller coaster of it works, it doesn't work, there's a bug, there's a fix, it's a very emotional process, and having someone to do it with you is for me, for example, is very important. I think for a lot of us, that's kind of what, it's a motivating thing when you're not alone in that kind of roller coaster. And I think Microsoft, my lab in particular, was very, very great in that aspect. So, for example, I work very well, as I said in the beginning, in coffee shops. I need to change places. I can't sit the entire day in the same place because sometimes I sit in the same place, I feel like I'm cycling the same ideas. I don't know, and then I need to move somewhere else. I need a different scenery. And I never had an issue of like, oh, you need to be in the lab these hours. I can be, really all they cared is, they want to see that I'm doing good work. That's what they cared about. How I'm doing it, nobody ever complained, about where I am, how many hours, how many this, am I working a lot, am I working less, it was completely up to me. Also, I think the freedom, as I said, I raised 3 kids, and, things came up during, raising, sometimes this one is sick, this one has a party in school, this one has I always had the freedom to choose my schedule, and that was very, very important to me. And I think each one of us has our own needs, for each one it's different. And the freedom, being creative requires a lot of freedom. For me, I work best in the morning. I'm sharp, everyone's asleep, so I have no distractions. I wake up early, and that's my thinking time. I don't open my email, I don't check anything. I just take my paper, a pen, a paper, and I think. And, I love that time in the morning. I know many people like working at night. I think a lot of us like when the world is asleep, somehow there's quiet enough and you can, think best. For me, getting a research problem out of my head is very hard. I get addicted to these problems. I remember there was one problem that I was working on for a very long time. And I remember one time I gave a talk. I was telling the audience, please get me out of this misery. Can someone just solve this problem for me? I would be so happy. I just want to stop thinking about it. So I get addicted to these problems. What helps me kind of take a break, so sometimes you need to take a break. I have to say many problems that I solved, I took a break and came back and solved them. Sometimes you need more, you take a break and more ideas come about. People in the field kind of, you hear more ideas and all of a sudden you can kind of use them or, take it. All of a sudden you have, our ideas are built on other people's ideas, Who I am today was not the same as who I am a week ago because I learned more things during this week. I went to talks, I learned. So we as researchers evolve all the time. So sometimes we work on something a lot, we're stuck. A year later, after hearing more results, all of a sudden, we have more techniques and all of a sudden we're able to solve the questions. So for me, seeing spark in my students really sparks me. I get really excited by other people's excitement, in particular by the students. So that helps kind of move away from other problems. Even though the problems that I've been thinking about for almost 20 years, they're still, and I didn't solve, they're still with me. I remember sometimes my students are like, I've been thinking about this already for 3 months and I still didn't solve it. I was like, 3 months? You gotta be kidding. I've been thinking about things for 10 years and I didn't solve them. Okay, 3 months is nothing. So many times I have a conversation with my students that they tell me they get alarmed that, they didn't publish anything and they're not making progress. And I always tell them, I think you're making great progress. Look where we were a week ago and where we are today. The way we understand it is very different. They're like, yeah, but we don't have the result. So what? That's not the definition of progress. The definition of progress is that you advance in your head, you understand it better. Eventually a result will come. But I think defining progress as kind of the output of the paper is not the right measure. Doing research requires a lot of faith and a lot of patience. And you also need to know when to let go. Sometimes, okay, so you had a good idea. Maybe the problem you were attempting didn't work. Maybe it's too hard. Maybe you don't quite have all the ideas yet. Maybe it's time to move on to another problem. But often this idea may still come handy at some point. So, at the end of the day, sometimes it feels like, oh, you made progress in one day. But it's not in one day. It's all these kind of understanding that led to that one day. Look, sometimes you stare at a blank piece of paper, nothing comes to your head, then you're stuck. Then maybe, maybe you take a break, maybe you move to a different problem, maybe, go for a swim, do something else. But when you think about a problem and you're, I understand this, or any understanding, that's progress. Even failure is very important, and it's part of the process. It's definitely a journey, and it definitely requires a lot of patience and a lot of hope and being persistent, a lot of persistence. And that's, I think, where having a community behind you is very important. Because when you're alone, it's so easy to get demotivated and not believe in yourself. But when you're a group, not necessarily working on the exact same problem, but, you're all trying, that you're not alone in this kind of fight, of moving science forward. And that's really fun.